this is Katie from Crafting Ruby Dreams, and welcome back to my channel where I talk about planners, goal setting, writing, publishing, and getting right with my finances. Today is a writing advice video, and I'm going to be specifically talking about burnout. I did touch on this a little bit in the taking a break video, which I will link to in a card above. I will also recommend checking out Becca Syme's YouTube channel, The Quitcast, and she has a series of videos on burnout, and I will also link to those both in the card above and in the description below. So, how do you know when you're in burnout? Well, first off, it's different for everyone, and you may be in burnout long before you realize it. Some things to look for is that you're not getting any fresh ideas for writing or stories. And even when you do get ideas, it's kind of hard to work up some excitement for them. An example for me right now is that I do have this story idea that I am excited about, but at the same time, it's not pulling me to write, and it's not pulling me to get to the end so I can figure out what happens. I am mostly a pantser. I do some planning, but it's more of planning to get me to the next point in the story as opposed to planning out the entire book. So the fact that I am excited about the idea of it, but I'm not necessarily excited to go write, that's a sign. Another sign may be that you feel like there's a wall between you and your creativity and it's feeling really hard to access. A lot of this is from personal experience, and so how I describe things might be different from how you describe things. So please leave comments below if you recognize any of these, but you would describe it in a different way. And the last sign that I have, and this pertains specifically to writing, but if you're not interested in reading anymore, or reading just really does not hold your attention the way it used to, doesn't matter how many books you don't have to have ever been like a 100+ book reader. Even if you were just a 12 book a year reader, that's what your usual output was. And if you are significantly below that, or just uninterested in reading, that's probably a sign that you're in burnout, because not only are you uninterested in outputting story, you are uninterested in consuming story and inputting it. So be very wary about that. I started tracking what I was reading over a decade ago. It took me that long, and that was because in my day profession, I was on an award committee and I had to track it. So after I was on the award committee and the habit had been ingrained in me, I just was tracking to see how many books I read a month. And after about a year or so, maybe 2 years, I realized that the amount of books that I read was very much tied to and indicative of the state of my mental health. And to give you a sign of where I am in burnout, I haven't read a book to completion in over a month. And the last time I read a book prior to that book was probably about 6 weeks. So my average number of books read last year in 2020 was probably a little over a book a month. It's probably going to be lower in 2021 unless I find a series to binge. The only reason my total number of books read in 2020 was because I found 2 series by 2 authors I love that I hadn't read yet. I actually knew about those series, but I finally was in a point where I'm like, okay, I've got the time and let's check it out. And I got hooked into them and I read them, and that was it. I didn't follow through. I didn't pick up any other really new to me, let alone new books, in all of 2020. So that's a sign for me. All right, so you've realized that you just might be in burnout. So what happens next? Well, first, take some time to grieve, because for me, this is a loss of an identity, not a complete loss, but it's just, I'm not who I used to be because of burnout. I am no longer an active writer. I'm not even an active reader anymore. And so those have been an integral part, the reading especially, have been an integral part of my identity since I was a kid. Writing took a while. It's mainly since my 20s that I've considered myself a writer, but I do still consider myself a writer and a reader, but I'm not active. And so there's a lot of feelings tied up in that. And so give yourself time to grieve if that's what you need. As part of the grieving process, and this is true of any grieving process, work toward acceptance as you can. And again, it's going to be different for everyone. Look into researching burnout and ways to be kind to yourself. As I said, check out the QuickCast series on burnout, especially if you're a writer. As part of that process, rest in whatever manner works for you and works best for you, because if you go watch the QuickCast, it's very focused on CliftonStrengths, and you'll realize that for certain people, depending on what their high strengths are, and I'm thinking very specifically of achiever, which for the record is my number 34, and there are only 34 strengths. If you are an achiever, you get rest and energy from doing things because that's just an inherent part of your nature. So do things, but maybe do other things. And related to that, just in general, look for small wins. So for me, it's doing these YouTube videos, frankly, and that is because they are relatively short. I can see something from start to completion in as little as a 24, heck, even a 12-hour period, depending on how long the upload time is. So going from doing big, huge projects that are marathons, YouTube videos are like quick sprints. And considering I have asthma, that can be interesting, but it's such a valuable thing for me in that I feel a sense of accomplishment. And so while to me the YouTube channel in building this community is a huge win, I love every single one of you for choosing to spend your time with me, and I thank you for it. It gives me more than you know, frankly. For as much as you get out of what I provide to you, having you follow me and invite me into your lives and spend your time with me, that's a huge thing for me. And so related to the small wins, figure out what still brings you joy and then do those things. Because if it's giving you joy, it is leading you in a direction that you need to be. My life's motto has pretty much always been since I was maybe in high school, and definitely since I was in college and my semester studying abroad, which I may get into that story one day, but my life's motto is pretty much, you will always find yourself in the place you need to be at the time you need to be there. So this is the place I need to be, and this is the time I need to be here. It's as simple as that. You may be thinking, all right, all of that makes sense, but how long is this burnout thing going to last? No, I don't know. I don't know, because it's going to not only depend on the person, it is going to depend on what led you into burnout. And I had to grapple with the realization within the last week that it could be a number of years before I'm fully out of this burnout period. And it's not a happy realization, frankly. The last time I can clearly identify as having been in burnout, it probably took me about a year to fall into burnout, and I was there for about another year. And then I think it was probably about another year after that I was able to mostly come out of it. I don't know that I was fully ready to come out of it, but I was writing stories again. I had ideas. I was excited to finish books, and I was finishing books. So I was out of it to the extent that I could be an active, productive writer. So take that with a grain of salt. But because of how long I, now looking back, recognize the initial signs of burnout, it might be a while for me to fully come out, and I would say at least a year. I need to just take a deep breath and rest, and it's probably going to be more like 18 months, and just kind of just write it. I might not start writing again until 2022, and that's, once again, not a happy realization to have. So there is that. And to tag on to the length, you need to be prepared to not be the same person you were and not have the same capabilities that you had prior to going into burnout. So you need to be okay with that, and hopefully you'll be back to where you were, but you may not be. And just don't necessarily actively think that that's going to be the case, but if that's what happens, just go, okay, I knew this is going to be a possibility. I'm going to deal with it, and I'm going to move forward and live my life the best that I can, doing the best that I can. That's my best advice. But when do you know you're fully out of burnout? Well, as I said, there's the burnout period where you're going down, and then there's the recovery period, and then there's the coming out period. But at what point up here are you actually ready to be going again? For writers, I would say that it's when you're, as I said before, when I was giving my example of my earlier experience with it, I was getting ideas again on a regular basis. I was able to see which story idea could pull me along to the entire end of a book, end of a novel. I could follow that, and I was ready to be writing again, to the point that I was getting up at 6 a.m. I am not a morning person. I am barely coherent before 10 a.m. Even when I've gotten 8 hours of sleep, 10 a.m. is about my, okay, I'm up level. So the fact I was getting up at 6 a.m. to get in at least half an hour, if not 45 minutes of writing prior to leaving for work. I was actually sometimes getting up before 6 in order to make this happen. I was willing to do that. I wouldn't say excited necessarily, but close to excited about getting up that early for not being a morning person. So those were the decisions I was like ready to make. And just because I wanted to make this happen, I was going to make this happen. And I'm definitely not at that point right now. I don't know if I ever would, because, oh, was that a pain? That was a pain. But again, that is a sign that I was ready to get that story written and ready to be in that story, because that was something I was willing to do. Kind of related to my sign of how do I know I'm in burnout and not wanting to really read. You're not only reading, you're willing to consume story in any form you can get it in. Right now, the way I'm primarily getting story is by reading webcomics. They're nice short hits, and they're making me feel still connected. And this one webcomic in particular, I've been reading for probably close to 20 years. That is almost, I found this webcomic no more than a year after it started. And that was close to 20 years ago. And this other webcomic started probably about 10 years ago. This year, this might be the 10-year anniversary of its start. And so those two particular comics make me feel still connected to my sense of identity as a reader, but I am not really consuming a whole lot. I'm like getting a little bit through some TV shows, but even TV shows, I'm not like binging on anything. I'm currently just started watching Ted Lasso, and something about TEDs apparently, because the other show that I'm watching, and I have watched it before, is Father Ted. I have talked about this in my weekly vlogs a little bit, but they're easy. Well, Father Ted is a relatively easy show. It does not require much from you except to have a particular sense of humor that is entertained by that particular type of show. But Ted Lasso is a relatively easy on the emotions show. It's going to like dig in and make you feel, but it's not going to make you feel wrenched apart. Is going to, for any wrenching apart that it does, it will almost immediately build you back up. So that's both emotionally the stage that I'm at, but that's also the story level that I'm at. And it's a complex story. It's an interesting show. And I definitely recommend Ted Lasso in particular. It's on Apple Plus. If you have a very certain type of humor, you like British, Irish humor, and a bit out there, I would check out Father Ted. Just check it out. That's on Amazon Prime is how my mom and my sister and I are accessing it. So those are my 2 show recommendations for what's, again, keeping me connected to consuming story. Here is my advice for dealing with burnout. Number 1, be kind to yourself. It's so important. If you start beating yourself up over it, it's just going to make you feel all that much worse. You're going to dig the hole even deeper, and it's going to be that much harder to come out of it. My number 2 piece of advice is to find some other creative outlet. Like I said, for me, it is these YouTube videos and coming up with the topic ideas, planning the schedule, and keeping connected in that way. Some other creative outlets that you might want to do is pick up a new hobby, such as knitting. I highly recommend. It is one of my favorites. Crocheting, needle pointing, embroidery, doing fan art and putting it up wherever fan artists put up these days. When I was younger, it was DeviantArt. I don't know if DeviantArt is still around. Writing fan fiction, maybe that's enough of a break for you. I did have one friend, she was so overwhelmed that she ended up focusing on reading and writing fan fiction for a while, and that's pretty much all that she did. And you know what? Now she's a New York Times bestselling author, so it may work for you. But some other friends, what they do, they go out and connect with nature. They go on hikes. They do, nowadays, they do socially distant things. So figure out something that's going to give you those small wins that I was talking about earlier, and find some way to exercise your creative mind, because here's the thing. It is a muscle. It is absolutely a muscle. So if you're not exercising it, it's going to waste away and not be there when you're ready to come back. You're going to have to build it back up again. You're going to have to build it back up no matter what, but you want to build it back up from 50%, not 5%, if that makes any sense. And here's the advice that I've gotten from a coach I've been seeing. Test the waters. If you're interested and you're thinking about writing, maybe write for a little bit. See where it takes you. And if it's pulling you along and if it feels good, do it. Continue writing until the point that it doesn't feel good anymore. Because the moment it stops feeling good, just stop. Because you don't want to push through that and break something. So, an analogy of an athlete, when you put a little bit of pain is not a bad thing, and it's strain, it's the point of building the muscle and you're pushing it to the next level. But it's when you push through to the point of breaking or tearing something that's damaging to you. So you don't want to damage yourself. You want to slowly build up the muscle. You don't want to damage yourself. So for as long as it feels good, go ahead and do it. The moment it feels bad and debilitating, stop. So that is my writing advice about burnout. I hope you have learned something from this. As I said, feel free to check out my taking a break video from earlier, as well as Becca Symes, the QuickCast YouTube channel. If you have found anything in this video useful, please hit that like button so that YouTube knows to recommend it to others. If you haven't already, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell to be notified about when future videos are available. Thank you so much, and may all your dreams be Ruby dreams. Bye-bye.